Hello, I'm Dottie Kay. Welcome to the third program on the law and local government. This series is presented as a public service and is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Upper St. Clair and Mr. Robert Hackett, attorney at law. The format consists of a lecture and general summary of each topic by Mr. Hackett, with league members leading discussion on the particular subject. Last time, we looked at the separation of power, and we continue with today's presentation, Upper St. Clair's fiscal policy. Although the programs are taped, the discussion is unrehearsed and spontaneous. Mr. Robert Hackett is the township's attorney and has been since 1975. He has lived in Upper St. Clair since 1960. He has offices in Upper St. Clair and is associated with Strasburger McKinnon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Here now to present the background information is Mr. Robert Hackett.
Today we're going to talk about a subject that interests most all citizens of every community. That subject is the simple one of money. How does Upper St. Clair spend its money? How does Upper St. Clair get its money? Though that subject of money is one about which the commissioners spend a great deal of their time, about which the manager spends a great deal of his or her time. It is, in essence, the focus of local government to make sure that local government provides services limited to the amount of money that the local government can receive from its citizens, from the state, and from the federal government. Let us now look at first the budget process in Upper St. Clair under the heading How Upper St. Clair Spends Money. First of all, the charter in Upper St. Clair provides that Upper St. Clair must annually adopt a budget. The budget must be adopted for each fiscal year, and the fiscal year in Upper St. Clair, that is the money year, corresponds with the annual year or the calendar year. Therefore, in Upper St. Clair, in late summer and early fall, the manager scurries around and tries to prepare that long budget which is due to be in front of the commissioners and the public by November 1st. The adoption of the budget generally occurs in December of each year for the next year, and the charter says that the budget must be adopted each year before you can spend any money in the next year. The Upper St. Clair budget document is more than just a budget, though. For the Upper St. Clair budget document under the charter provides that the budget adoption also levies taxes. That is, if there's a real estate tax, the real estate tax is automatically levied on each person's property when the budget is adopted. That's not true in many, many communities, but under our home rule charter, that's the way our system works in Upper St. Clair. Also, When the budget is adopted, it acts as an automatic appropriation to spend that money, so that there is no need for the commissioners to authorize the spending of the money after it's appropriated in the budget. Many citizens don't understand that. However, even though there is a levy and appropriation in the budget, there are still very stringent provisions in the charter that control the payment of monies and that allow for an annual audit. In Upper St. Clair, we do not have what is known as the tax collector system. That is, we don't elect a tax collector. The fiscal officer in charge of all the money of the township is the township manager, because, as we said before, Upper St. Clair has a strong manager charter. However, as strong as the manager is, the manager must have the checks co-signed by the president of the Board of Commissioners or his designee or an authorized substitute for the president. Therefore, when the checks are paid, the commissioners are involved in the payment of the funds, although those funds have already been appropriated. That acts as a check on the expenditures in the township, as we talked about in our previous session on checks and balances, because the manager alone cannot sign the check. The charter also provides for an annual audit by a certified public accountant. Therefore, you have certified public accountants examining the township books on an independent basis on a yearly basis. That's provided for in the charter, and the accountants come in, as in any audit, and search through the records and make sure that there's a proper accounting of the township funds. A very important provision of the charter, because many communities in the old days had tax collectors who collected all the money and turned it over, and there was really no audit of the tax collectors. That's not a possible situation in Upper St. Clair. Next, we want to get to two very important areas of spending in Upper St. Clair that are covered in the township code, or what we call the administrative code. Those provisions concern capital improvements programs and purchasing. First, in our township administrative code, we have a provision that the township will adopt every year a 5-year capital improvement code. Now, what that is a planning device. It enables the commissioners to look forward into the township and say, what capital improvement projects do we think we would like to have in the next 5 years? The capital improvement program is not an appropriation. That is, it is not an authorization to spend any funds. It is merely a planning device. Nevertheless, our law, the charter, and the code provide that we have a capital improvement planning device adopted every year, which looks 5 years into the future. And that enables the commissioners to have a good planning handle on what's going to be done in Upper St. Clair in the next 5 years each year. Finally, Upper St. Clair has a very detailed purchasing system, and that is that in Upper St. Clair, for the most part, with few exceptions, uses a public bidding system, or what is known in the legal trade, a bidding procurement system, and follows a bidding procurement code. The reason that Upper St. Clair does that is because Upper St. Clair, under its charter, felt that the purchasing of supplies, the purchasing of services, and the purchasing of miscellaneous items should be done in an open public bidding system. Upper St. Clair uses what is known as the best responsible bidder system. First of all, you take various vendors or contractors or suppliers of services and you classify them if they are or are not a responsible party. If they are a responsible party, judging on past performance, reputation in the community, and so on, then that party becomes a responsible bidder. Once the party has become a responsible bidder and a bid is put out for action by various contractors or vendors of supplies, a responsible bidder can bid on a particular project. When the bids are received, they are sealed bids and they are opened publicly. And when they are open, the commissioners will then examine the bids and select what is called the best responsible bidder. Now, the best responsible bidder is not always the lowest bidder, although generally I would say that the best responsible bidder is the lowest bidder. But the best responsible bidder could be, for example, one who is closer and can supply the material in a more efficient and less costly manner, even though his bid or her bid might be slightly higher. Using the open bidding system and the best responsible bidding system, Upper St. Clair is able to ensure its citizens that fairness is applied to all procurement in Upper St. Clair. That was the intention of the charter, and that is what the management in Upper St. Clair follows on a day-to-day basis. Now let's look at the problem that every community, every municipality has all over the United States. You've adopted your budget. You know what you want to spend. You have, in essence, established the citizens' wish list. However, how are you going to pay for all this? How are you going to get the money in from the local government, the state government, the federal government, or whoever, and pay for that budget you've just adopted? Well, every community has two choices. You can tax and you can borrow. Of course, when you borrow and you're a local community, it's not quite like the federal government because the day of reckoning comes. We're first going to look at the procedure and what a local government can tax. In Pennsylvania, you have passed by the state legislature the Local Tax Enabling Act. The Local Tax Enabling Act, in essence, tells a township or borough or municipality what subjects it can tax. And the Local Tax Enabling Act also provides restrictions on certain rates of taxation and certain areas of taxation. For example, there is a limit under the Local Tax Enabling Act as to how much you can tax a non-resident. There is no limit under that act on the rates of taxation which you can put on your residents. That case was very recently decided in late 1984 by the state Supreme Court because many home rule communities in Pennsylvania needed money and increased the rate of earned income tax higher than the Local Tax Enabling Act stated it could go. Pittsburgh did it, Monroeville did it, Upper St. Clair did it, Bethel Park did it. And the citizens sued and said, hey, municipalities, you can't do that. You're ruled by the Local Tax Enabling Act. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not true. If you're a home rule community, you can put the rate on your own residents for earned income tax that you want to put on your residents. Therefore, it gives the home rule communities a wide range to carry and to levy taxes on earned income and similar taxes on residents of their particular municipality. Of course, the municipality also gets a great deal of its income from real estate tax. Thus, real estate tax and earned income tax are the two leading taxes in Upper St. Clair which provide the funds to run the Upper St. Clair government. Now, let's examine just briefly what we mean by earned income tax. It really means what it says. It's tax on money that one earns. Incidentally, it's not tax on interest or unearned income. That is, income which comes from stocks or interest on a savings account. We all know that Upper St. Clair's population has increased a great deal in the last years. In the decade of the 70s, it greatly increased, and it continues to increase, but not as great a rate. That increase in population and inflation in general has made the earned income tax a very important tax to Upper St. Clair, and a tax which provides a substantial portion of the revenues needed to run this municipality. The real estate tax, in comparison, increased greatly in the 60s and 70s when Upper St. Clair was having the housing boom of the 60s and 70s. However, in the late 70s and in the 80s, the housing boom has not continued. And the real estate tax, therefore, has not increased as much as the earned income tax. However, again, there is no limit under our charter, as there is under many charters, on how much the commissioners could increase the earned income tax or the real estate tax. There is no upward limit which binds the commissioners. The commissioners simply try to have good government and make the taxes levied on real estate and earned income tax just and applied proportionately to how they believe people should be taxed. Now let's look at the difference in the taxes. For one thing, the earned income tax, people say, is a more just tax because it's applied proportionately to a person's income, much the same as our federal income tax. That is, if you earn more, you pay more. On the other hand, there is an argument that people say that the real estate tax really penalizes the wrong person because an older person who is retired or a person with a low income may live on property that is fairly valuable and have to pay high taxes if you raise the real estate tax rather than the earned income tax. This dichotomy in taxation is true in every government, state, federal, and local. And no one knows the answer, but one has to consider the consequences of the taxes. Other income is raised in Upper St. Clair to some significant rate from fees. These fees come from what the township charges for services. That is, the township has recreational services. It has educational services. It has various services such as building inspection services or zoning inspection services, which it renders to people in the township. The philosophy in Upper St. Clair has always been that the services rendered for various township miscellaneous services should always be paid for by the people receiving the services. Therefore, the township has recovered fees for services rendered to pay for those special services rendered. The fees are really a minor part of the income to the township, but as old Everett Dirksen said, a billion here, a billion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. Let's now look at the last item on our agenda in the money subject of the township. That is township borrowing. I think we can put this item in focus if we look and, quote, focus on a recent interesting issue presented to the citizens of the township. I have lived in the township for 24 years, and I believe in 3 or 4 times in those 24 years, the people of the township have come to the commissioners and said, we'd like a public swimming pool. Now, a public swimming pool is a capital improvement. It's something that costs generally a great deal of money. Each time that that has happened, and it happened incidentally in 1983 and 1984, as it did in 1977-78. Each time that the people ask for a capital improvement project, the commissioners, under state law, must analyze the cost of the project and decide how that project will be funded. How are we going to get the money? Well, state law says this. The state law under the Local Tax Unit Debt Act says that we can have 2 kinds of debt. We can have electoral debt, and we can have non-electoral debt. The non-electoral debt is enacted and can be passed by the commissioners, the governing body of the municipality. That is, if the governing body wishes to borrow $1 million to fix the roads, the governing body can borrow that money on its own action without having the people vote on the subject and spend that money if the municipality is not over its non-electoral limitation imposed by the state law. Now, in order to figure the non-electoral limitation, you take the income for the previous 3 years. Let's say it's $5 million a year. You add that up, you get 15 million, you divide by 3, and that gives you 5 million, which then becomes your non-electoral debt limit. If, however, you want the citizens to approve debt, there is no limit. That is, the township could conceivably borrow $100 million if the citizens voted that that's what they wanted to do. Now, generally, when it's a long, involved, or expensive capital improvements project, the commissioners in Upper St. Clair, having been elected by the people, turn to the people and say, are you in favor of this borrowing? If so, the commissioners then take a particular project, put it on the ballot, and the people vote as to whether or not they wish to spend the money for a particular capital improvement project. This was done, for example, for the swimming pool on 2 different occasions, and the citizens voted the swimming pool down. That is, they voted against making the swimming pool electoral debt. The commissioners, of course, listened to the voters, and they did not make the swimming pool non-electoral debt. And the reason is that the commissioners and the philosophy has the township has been over the past years that the non-electoral debt, which is limited, should be spent for essential township services such as roads, sewers, and so on. If there are would be considered optional or recreational spending to be done, the commissioners have not used their limitation on non-electoral debt to pay for this kind of capital improvements or spending. Now, the reasoning behind this, whether you agree or disagree with it, is that they are afraid that you might have an emergency which needs your non-electoral debt to be spent for essential services. For example, the state has told us that the McLaughlin Run watershed has problems in It's sanitary sewer. We don't know exactly what that will cost, but it could cost quite a sum of money, maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million, to correct that problem. We must spend it for that problem to correct it, according to the state, and therefore the philosophy has been to have non-electoral debt available to do this. The electoral debt, then, which is unlimited in scope or amount, is left to the citizens of the township, and the citizens can approve an unlimited amount of electoral debt. On the other hand, the everyday borrowing for essentials is used by this township as non-electoral debt, because the state legislatures wish to impose on different governing bodies a limitation that didn't allow governing bodies to run the debt of any municipality beyond what they believed the municipality could afford, and that's why you have a limitation. Within the limit of the Local Government Debt Act that we've explained on non-electoral and electoral debt, the commissioners are free to spend the money by adopting the budget and receive the money through taxes and fees. There you have it. Money in from taxes and fees, money in from borrowing, money out from budget, purchasing, capital improvements. That's where your money goes.
Thank you, Bob. Very interesting.
You're welcome.
Now for the questions from our league members. To my left, Betty Sweeney, Bernice Bateman, and Gail Neustadt. Betty, I'm sure you have something you're dying to ask Mr. Hack.
You mentioned that there is no tax collector in Upper St. Clair. How are taxes collected? And also, is there a provision in the event someone doesn't pay to collect those taxes?
Yes, the old system of having an elected tax collector was used throughout Pennsylvania for first-class townships, second-class townships, many boroughs. By electing the tax collector, there was a built-in conflict, because since the tax collector was elected, very often he did not wish to be, so to speak, mean to the electors, and therefore he did not pursue the collection the way a lot of communities would like. So under our charter, we did away with the system of the tax collector, and we have the system where the manager, in essence, is the tax collector because of his position as chief administrative officer, and does it through the Department of Finance and the head of that finance department in a straight administrative role. And therefore, he enforces, to answer the second part of your question, he enforces the tax collection rules and regulations in a much better position because the manager's not elected.
Does that answer your question, Betty?
And now, are just tax bills sent out, and then if someone doesn't pay, then what is the follow-up?
All right, well, we have two basic systems of taxation in Upper St. Clair with some miscellaneous one. One is the real estate taxes, which are collected in connection with the county taxes and the school district taxes, that being the township real estate taxes. That's the millage that you hear about. And that millage is approximately 10.5 to 11, somewhere in that area. And those taxes, if you don't pay them, are automatically a lien on your property. So that you can collect that by enforcing the amount of those taxes against the real estate owned by the individual taxpayer. Now, the other tax, which is substantial and which every wage earner pays in Upper St. Clair, is what's called the earned income tax. Now, we have enforcement provisions under that system of collection too. We have a whole long book of regulations. We can, for example, garnish wages. We can sue the individual person and get a judgment and collect that way. So that's also an enforcement process, but it isn't automatically a lien on the property, the real estate property, the way the real property tax is.
Bob, I have a question regarding capital improvements. What are some of the capital improvements for this year and for the next 5 years?
Well, the commissioners, of course, decide what the capital improvements are, and the commissioners have to, by law, write down what the capital improvements should be. There are two main capital improvement thrusts this year that are currently being considered, and that is the renovation of the municipal building is a very mainstream and a very significant capital improvement. And the other is that the township is under orders from the Department of Environmental Resources, that's the State Department, to do something about the sewer problems in the McLaughlin Run watershed. And that's going to be a significant expenditure that may be this year or next year and the year after. The point being that the listing of capital improvements without actually appropriating money for them is a means of planning and causing the citizens to know what capital improvements are under consideration. Now, from my own knowledge, I can tell you those are two big ones. I can't tell you what's on the list. I really don't remember what's on the list. But the list is there for any citizen to look at.
In the bidding procurement system that is used here, in order to bid, a bidder must be classified as a best responsible bidder. Who does the classifying?
Well, the township keeps records on what they consider are responsible bidders in any particular area of procurement or any particular group of vendors. And if you're on the responsible bidder list, that makes you eligible to bid. Then, after the bids are received for a particular contract, or either to build a building, which would be a construction bid, or procurement in the sense of purchasing merchandise of one type or another, then it's analyzed to see who is the best responsible bidder. And the best responsible bidder is then put through an analysis. First, are they a responsible bidder? That is, did they default on a job? Did they supply inferior product or do inferior construction job? And if that's the case, they would be struck as being ineligible because they're not on that list. Assuming they all are eligible on a particular list, the manager and the township administration makes the decision what they consider to be the best responsible bidder. And for example, there you would look at best in the sense of an analysis of the price cost control. A good example of that would be we have bids for asphalt, for instance. Now, a company that, say, is in the other side of Allegheny County might bid $27 a ton, whereas a company a mile away or 2 miles away might bid $29 a ton. Fact of the matter is, if you have to take your truck to the other side of Allegheny County, it costs more at $27 a ton to go over there than it does at $29 a ton here. So they wouldn't be, even though they were the lowest bidder, they would not be determined by the township to be the best responsible bidder. So the whole idea is that the best responsible bidder is not necessarily the lowest bidder.
And is this done each time that a bid comes up?
That's right.
These people don't stay on the list as best responsible bidders?
No, that's the best responsible bidder is really a name only for an individual contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Bob,
You mentioned the township and contracting and that. How much can the township spend on a project without advertising for a bid on that given project?
Well, there's a very low limit on that. It's, I believe, $2,500.
Anything above 2,500?
That's right. I can't remember, honestly, Dottie, whether we raised it to 5,000 or 2,500, but I can tell you that it's right around that. So anything over that in any kind of procurement or purchase has to be bid. And you can't tack. That is, you can't have, you can't find a favorite supplier. And then because it's a favorite supplier and you know you can't go over 2,500, you give him 10 $1,000 orders. That's called tacking. And that is prohibited. That will not work. So you must analyze the contracts to make sure they're different contracts and that you're not tacking to avoid the bidding limit.
Mm-hmm. You did mention when you were answering Betty's question about being on a list in order to bid. Does this mean not any company can put in a bid to the township on a
Yes,
particular
any company
project?
can put a bid in, and then they investigate the company to try to determine on their responsible bidder list whether they feel the company is a responsible bidder. It doesn't prevent a new company from bidding, but they do try to investigate the company and see if the company has a history of performance and has a history of being eligible as a responsible bidder. Very few companies, I think, are really considered not responsible.
Okay.
For one reason is that in most public contracts that are at all sizable in construction, they have to post a bond. And if the surety company will give them a bond, and they're responsible enough to get the bond, they're generally responsible enough to be considered a responsible bidder.
Thank you.
Bob, when you referred to fees for educational services, what would be an example of some of these educational services?
Well, I guess we're mixing that in for fees for educational as well as recreational services. The recreation department carries on what would be considered arts and crafts and things like that. Generally, the fees in the township are connected in one way or another with recreation. Whether you would call tennis lessons as educational, I don't know. But the whole philosophy of the township is that the people who use whatever it is they're using should pay for it. That is, the township has been for years moving away from a philosophy that citizens should have a, let's say, free golf course, if there was one. The township commissioners currently believe that if you're going to have a golf course, the fees from that golf course should support the maintenance and use of the course. And I guess that's true. For instance, the commissioners are now considering, and it's public knowledge, that they're looking at replacing one of the tennis bubbles. And that's probably going to be a substantial cost. Now, the commissioners analyze the cost of the bubble, and they believe that the people that play tennis there should pay for that operation. And that's been the philosophy of Upper St. Clair Township for some time. Now, that's really not a law. That's a philosophy of the commissioners, and that's a good example. Your question is a good example of pointing out the difference between having to do it because of a law and establishing a philosophy, which is what the commissioners should do. That's their philosophy, and it's not required by law, but it is the way they want to run the township, and they have every right to do so.
Bob, I have a question pertaining to that. Does the township have any provisions for a youngster that might like to participate in a sport that charges a user fee if they cannot afford it, such as golf or tennis?
To my knowledge, the township does not. I think the Upper St. Clair Athletic Association has provisions for that. They sponsor the football leagues, the soccer leagues, the baseball leagues, and I am very sure that that association probably would handle the problems if someone wanted to participate in the programs but couldn't afford it. But I think the township has carefully taken the position that that is not, public money is generally not used to that, except, of course, in any situation, obviously if you establish a park and that park has within it a baseball field, that baseball field's not going to pay for itself. But in general, again, they have followed that philosophy in the tennis programs. The ski programs, for instance, are fully self-supporting. Don't cost the township any money.
Thank you.
Bob, I'd like to know, thank you. I'd like to know if fines are included as income for the township, and if you consider these as separate from fees.
Yes, fines are considered income for the township. Fines are separated from fees. Fees are, for instance, if you come in and you want to build a house, you pay a building permit fee based on the value of the construction of the house. That is considered fee income. That fee is set in the under the chapter, I believe it's chapter 57 of the code, which sets all fees for the township. Fines, on the other hand, would be paid in various ways. For example, you would consider late payments of sewer fees, late payments of earned income tax carry a penalty, interest, which in that penalty would really be considered a fine. Then you also have fines that are considered income in the sense if a person violates a statute, such as vehicular traffic violations, or zoning violations. You can be fined $300 a day if you violate a zoning law, and those fines are considered income and are paid because you enforce the laws rather than paid as a fee where you get something. Generally, you pay a fee, you get something. If you pay a fine, you've done something wrong.
Thank you. I'd also like to know if the people had voted favorably for the township pool, where would the township have gotten its money to pay for this, going along with what you had explained earlier about our philosophy?
All right, if the people had voted for the township swimming pool, then you would have had the electoral body approve a debt. And since the electoral body approved a debt, it doesn't count under the debt limit that I discussed. Therefore, the commissioners are free to spend $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever it would have cost, to build the pool. The commissioners do that by borrowing money on the money market, by issuing bonds, which are tax-free bonds to the public, and they would go into the money market and see what you could sell those bonds for. Might be 8% interest, it might be 9% interest, whatever the interest rate would be. And incidentally, that's one of the reasons that I advised the township not to put on the ballot how much it would cost, because when you go into the bond market, you don't know what it's going to cost. And I didn't feel that it was proper for the township to give an approximate or printed cost of what it would be. But in any event, that's where they'd get the money then, from the money market by selling the bonds. And then those bonds would be repaid over a period of years to the bondholders. And the township citizens would have their taxes increased, either real estate or earned income taxes, in a sufficient amount to pay back those bonds. So it's just like your house, you know, if you buy a house for $100,000 and you take a 30-year mortgage, at the end of 30 years, you've paid what? $200,000, maybe $210,000. Who knows? Whatever. That's called the debt service. So that would have to be paid back by increasing the taxes of the township one way or another. Now, in that particular situation, you couldn't have had the user fees pay for that. There is no way in a northeastern community that you can get enough from swimming pool users to amortize the bonds. You might get enough for the upkeep of the pool, but there's no way you could get that cash flow.
Bob, what will our next 3 programs be on?
Well, Dottie, the next 3 programs to finish this series are going to be about what I think most citizens consider the most important topic in Upper St. Clair. That is a total discussion of land use control and zoning in Upper St. Clair. We're going to spend 3 programs on that because when most citizens buy their home in Upper St. Clair, they are vitally interested in the land use and zoning controls of the municipality.
This concludes the 3rd in our series of the law and local government. If you have program suggestions for the League of Women Voters community information programming, please write League of Women Voters, 1 of Upper St. Clair, 171 Boxfield Road, Pittsburgh, 15241. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Dottie Kay. I want to thank you, Bob Hackett. It was a wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank the League members, Betty Sweeney, Bernice Bateman, and Gail Newstad.